On this channel, I'm very excited to show you how to grow mushrooms. In this video, I'm going to give a complete overview, start to finish. You start by injecting your mushrooms into the grain. And so this will either be spores or it will be liquid culture. And I'll go back at the end and tell you about those. You'll have your needle on. You'll put some alcohol on your port, which I'm going to tell you how to do, and then you inject it in. So let's talk about preparing this jar. These are just mason jars. I use pint, you can use quart, you can use whatever you want. And you see here a self-healing injection port, and this is micro pour tape. What you can do, the holes, you can get the teeny tiny, get these off Amazon, get both these off Amazon, and get the small self-healing injection ports. And with that, you can just take a paper punch that you get at Walmart for $1.50 and just boom, punch 2 holes in the lid, put micro pour tape over one hole, put the self-healing injection port in the other. I use oats. Your oats, you'll soak them for 4 hours, strain them, put them in the jar, leave about this much room so you can shake it when it's time. And then you'll put this in a pressure cooker. An Instant Pot works just fine. And go ahead and pressure cook it for probably 2.5 hours, just to be sure. To tell you what I do it for 140 minutes, and it works fine, but people advise more, so let's go ahead and go with that. Doesn't hurt anything to do it a little more. So 2.5 hours in the pressure cooker. Of course, let it cool off. Then, like I said, you inject in your spores, and then you'll let it sit. This is a sterile environment because you put it through the pressure cooker. So you want it to grow in here and get strong. And so I suggest that you leave it in here for a minimum of 6 weeks. And what's going to happen, you're going to start to see little white fuzz, and you know it's growing. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is one that I inoculated probably, looks like 2.5 weeks ago. And here, I love this one. I haven't given it a shake. So here you can just see the brown grain, and here you see what it looks like when the mycelium's growing. And there, look at it reaching out to find other strands that it can connect with. And it's going to colonize this whole jar. Now, what I typically do at this stage, I'll go ahead and shake this jar to distribute the mycelium. Now, this one, I'm not going to shake. I'm just going to pull it out when it's all white in 6 weeks. And the reason I'm showing you this jar is to remind myself to talk about the principle of experimentation. Feel free to be very experimental in this. I love that the person who taught me how to grow, I kept peppering him with questions. And so he said, no more questions. You know enough to get started. Let the mushrooms teach you how to grow them. And I thought that was the most woo nonsense ever. But I love how the mushrooms do teach us. And it's just a fun process of learning and growing our skills as we grow the mushrooms. So you'll let this go, let this grow. This will become solid white. Like here, you see it. But if I were to give this a shake, here, do a close. If I were to give this a good shake, then it would look almost all brown like this. It'd be like, where did the white go? Because it'll mix all in. This really isn't very much. This is all on the outside. So again, probably give it a good shake when it's about to this point, and then let it again get totally white. And don't worry about it spending too much time in this jar, because this is a good, healthy place for it to be, a sterile place. 6 weeks, even 8 weeks, let it be good and robust. Keep this as it's in the jar in a dark place and a warm place, ideally around 78 degrees. So we're starting dark and warm, and we're moving, the next thing I'm going to show you, to a little brighter and maybe a little cooler, 72, 73 degrees. But if you do the whole thing around 78 degrees, that's fine. So when your jar is completely white, it's time to move it into what we call a monotub, a fruiting chamber. And so you're going to need what we call substrate. This is called spawn, and when it's fully colonized, these are some of the words, you're going to move it into a grow tub with substrate. And the substrate I like to use is coconut coir, and it comes in a brick like this that you have to chisel off parts. And I have some vermiculite and gypsum in there, and I'll put down in the description how much I do. And coir also comes loose, and that's mainly what I use, so that I don't have to deal with the bricks. And I'll put the ratios of water. So with the bricks, it is a little easier to pasteurize. You just drop it in, take it out of the bag, put it in, then you add boiling water, and I'll tell you the ratio. You know, for this brick, this is about 125 grams. I would add about 3.5 cups of boiling water. I would put the lid on it, and then I would stick this under a blanket, and that pasteurizes it. It's not sterilized, it's pasteurized. And so at this point, we're racing against potential contaminations. In here, in the jar, you're not gonna have contaminants. You shouldn't, because this has been sterilized. In here, you probably are. We're not surgically clean. We're clean enough, and we have robust mycelium that will outcompete other contaminants. So then when this has cooled off, you'll take off the lid, you'll put in your jar or 2 jars, and then you'll mix it up a bit with a spoon. So, sorry, before you do this, you'll wipe it out with 70% isopropyl alcohol. Let that, of course, dry. And then you go ahead and pasteurize your coir in it. You add your fully colonized spawn, and with a spoon that has been hit with alcohol that dries, you flame it, and so you sterilize with flame. Stir that up, and what I do is I set aside a little of this substrate on the lid before I do that. So I mix it all in, and then I put this back on top, and then I click it, and I leave this shut for a few days, depending how it's looking, maybe up to 10 days or even 2 weeks if it's very humid on the outside, because you want this to be very humid. And at some point, you're going to want to introduce more oxygen. You know, that's what this hole allows. It allows oxygen to go in, CO2 to come out. Your mycelium, your mushrooms, they breathe oxygen. So we don't want to choke them off from oxygen. We like that it stays nice and humid in here. But when your substrate turns white, almost completely white, then it's ready for some air. And so you go ahead and briefly crack it and see how dry it is. Maybe give it a squirt with a fine mist spray bottle, and then get the top back on. Then bit by bit, you're gonna wanna introduce some oxygen. Maybe leave it a little off like this, then maybe a little more off like this. And then your mushrooms will start to grow. And people panic because they see little white knots forming and think, oh my gosh, is that some sort of fungus coming in? No, that's the primordia. Those are the beginnings of your mushrooms. And so they'll start to grow tall. Again, you'll need more oxygen. As you're letting in more oxygen, then you'll have to mist more often. You don't want it wet, just make sure, just spray it and get the humidity going in there. Don't let it dry out, but again, you don't want it wet. And so this is something you'll experiment with, and you'll find the right ratio. Your mushrooms, and people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, all sorts of contaminants would come in here. That's true. We're not going for surgical sterility. When you have your first successful grow, you get more experience. Then you might want a grow hood. You might want all sorts of different equipment. You might want humidity control. You might want heating elements. You can have a lot of fun with this. I aim to teach people how to have your first grow as cheap as possible. Now I'll say the Divine Assembly, we sell grow kits. That's what a lot of this stuff is from, the grow kit. If you want to buy from us, that's awesome. We'd love to do that. It's thedivineassembly.org. We sell the kits separately if you want. We'll sell them with spores. We'll sell the spores separately. Or if you want to do it completely on your own, that's great. My point isn't to sell kits. My point is to help teach people to grow. And I realize that, you know, some people might not have the time to put this together, so they want to buy a kit. Other people, they might not have the money to buy a kit. They want to do it on their own. You can save some money doing it on your own, especially if you go in with some friends and you can get some things in bulk. So yeah, I've been meaning to tell you where to get things. You can get the syringes and the needles off Amazon. The Divine Assembly, we sell spores. A lot of people sell spores. A Double Blind Magazine, they sell kits and spores. I think they're a very reputable source. Your jars, I get these at Walmart, and again, get these two things at Amazon. I get the tubs at Walmart, and you can buy, you know, if you buy 10 of these, then they're really cheap. I get the coconut coir. So I get it off Amazon because I get it in big quantities. You could get this at PetSmart, Petco in the reptile section. Vermiculite you can get at you know, your local gardening store. Yeah, that's a good place to look. Gypsum, you probably don't need to worry about that if you're on your own, because you just use such a small amount. You got to buy in bigger quantities, and it's not all that necessary. Okay, and then when your mushrooms start to grow, you're going to create like a terrarium. You're gonna, again, mist everything, and you're gonna put this on like this so they can get tall, because your mushrooms will grow tall. And then again, same thing, you know, be sure to give them some air, And again, it's not perfectly sterile. You're gonna have some contamination that comes in. Now, depending on where you live, maybe that is a problem. I have been very fortunate to not have contamination. I live, you know, high up in a high rise. Maybe that has something to do with it. But remember, we want our mycelium to just come out of the jar so strong, then it really will outcompete just about everything. So your mushrooms will grow tall, the caps will get fat, and then when they start to expand out like this, the veil drops is what they call it. And when they start to expand out like this, or even right before, you'll be learn to judge that. Then you can go ahead and harvest them. You can cut them, or you can just twist them off and then go ahead and dehydrate your mushrooms. I do 4 hours at 130 degrees, and that works well. I think that's about the overview. Good luck. If you have any questions, I'll be monitoring the comments, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions. I think that's a pretty good overview. In the future, we'll break this down step by step by step. And I just want to say, it's easy. It really is. And even if you do fail a time or two when you're learning, you know, you can reuse. You can wash most of this stuff and reuse it. So it shouldn't be that expensive for you to get your first successful grow. And once you have that confidence, again, you might start cloning, you might start doing all sorts of fancy, funky things. But I hope that the one thing that you definitely have is a solid connection with your mushrooms that helps in your worship with those mushrooms. Thank you.